the chunks or parts in the sentences that make the sentences meaningful. Now let's take a look at the first part first. We're going to discuss this first. How do you answer questions related to sentence structure? Because we talk about structure, you need to understand at least has to have a subject and a verb. Okay, one subject, one verb. I think we can actually make it more general, but here because we talk about parts of speech, that is why I use the terminology verb. But the more correct terminology should be predicate. So a subject and a predicate. And in a predicate, of course, you have a verb. But for now, let's just say a subject and a verb to make it simpler. So first understand that a sentence has at least a subject and a verb. And then the second one, make sure that the sentence is the requirement. And what is the requirement? That it has at least a subject and a verb. So this is the question that you did or you dealt with earlier. So the answer, the goddess Athena. You were right, because here in this incomplete sentence, we need to find the correct answer to actually complete the sentence so that the sentence is structurally correct. What you have here was the patron and protector of the city of Athens is predicate. And in a predicate, as I said earlier, there must be a verb. So the verb is was. So what's missing, because a sentence needs to have at least one subject and one verb, the missing part is the subject. And of all the options here, A, B, C, D, the subject is A, the goddess Athena. While B, it has a conjunction, and then if you choose B, then there will be two subjects, that the goddess Athena. Here you only need one subject. And again in C, you have two subjects. It is the god of Athena. And then if you choose D, then the sentence will be incomplete. This one, tens of thousands of Maoris, and then you have blank between 1815 and 1840 in intertribal wars. So here you have a subject, and in a sentence you need at least one subject and a verb, meaning what's missing is the verb. And the verb here in options A, B, C, and D, the verb is D, died. So as simple as that. You have already got the subject, you need the verb, and so choose the verb. Now in this sentence, as you take a look, you have in the Middle Ages. And then blank, and then continue with the next parts of the sentences. As you can see, this one is not, you already have subjects, a subject and verbs. In the first part, so the sentence is divided into two clauses or two parts. As you can see, there is this use of comma. So this one is not a simple sentence. So in the first part, you see that the predicate, use a system for notating, has the verb used. So there is already a verb. Do we have a subject here? Yes, we do. We have they, a subject, and then a predicate could be performed by musicians, and you have verb could be performed. So actually, this sentence has already had a subject and a verb, but because there are two parts of this the parts clauses, so meaning that each clause, a sentence also, a clause just like a sentence needs a subject and a verb. So like it or not, you need a subject for the first clause, for the first part of the sentence. So the subject is missing. But if you say the sentence has already had a subject, because in the beginning you have in the Middle Ages, as we know, usually subject is put on sentence, we have to again look whether the beginning of the sentence is really a subject or not. In the Middle Ages, though it looks like a subject, it's not a subject. It's called an object of preposition because there is a preposition in. So if you have a preposition in the beginning of a sentence and it is followed by a noun, and which is a noun is subject is noun, it doesn't mean that that part is a subject. It can be like this. It can be an object of preposition. So what's missing is actually the subject. And so the subject is composes. So again, even though there is something that looks like a noun in front of a sentence, it doesn't mean that it is. Be careful. Please all understand it. And then identify that the sentence has at least one subject and one verb. And now we move on to number 3 to answer what you can do to answer questions related to sentence structure. Number 3, make sure that there are no double or repeated subjects or verbs in the sentence. Okay, so no double or repeated subjects or verbs in the sentence. Be careful. And number 4, recognize reduced forms of verbs. They take the form of present participle and past participle. So because a sentence, a simple sentence, a sentence that has no conjunction, no connectors, it has only one part or one clause, sentence has only one subject and one verb. Meaning, if there are two subjects, then it's wrong. If there are two verbs, it's wrong. And the only thing that we can do to make the sentence still right, but contains two kinds of verbs, then we have to reduce the verbs so that there is only one main verb and the other one is actually in the reduced form. So let's take a look at the sample sentence. So as you can see here, you have already have a subject, osteoarthritis, and then you have a verb, is. So meaning this sentence already fits the requirement that it has at least a subject and a verb. It doesn't need another verb, but another verb is needed for the meaning to be correct. So that we have to use a reduced form so that the sentence structure is still correct. So there will be no double or repeated verb because we have already got a verb. And the answer to this is A, causing. You may wonder why not caused, because causing is the present participle, a reduced form of verb, and caused is a past participle, also a reduced form of verb. Here in this case, like it or not, you need to understand whether the meaning has a passive or active meaning. In this sentence, the past participle must have an active meaning. Because it must have an active meaning, you have to choose A, causing. Now, let's take a look at another one. Here again, we have already got the subject, an allergic reaction. And then we have a verb, is. So the sentence fits the requirement. It has a sentence and a verb. But again, we need something to make the sentence meaningful and conveyed correctly. So there should be another verb. So the verb is reduced because we have already got a verb. The reduced form the reduced form is either present participle or past participle. Here you have two options, B, calling, and C, called. Like it or not, you need to understand whether the sentence needs an active meaning of the participle or passive meaning of the participle. Here, it needs a passive meaning of the participle. And that's why the answer is C, not B. Okay, so first, understand sentence structure, understand that sentence needs at least a subject and a verb, and understand that there should be no repeated verb, no repeated subjects, but if we need verbs to make the sentence meaningful, then the verb has to be reduced. And the reduced form takes the form of participle, passive meaning, and present participle for active meaning. Now let's continue. Discuss earlier syllable sentences of one subject and one verb, at least one subject and one verb. Because there is this phrase at least, meaning a sentence can actually has more than one subject and one verb. So compound and complex sentences have at least two clauses connected by a conjunction. So there should be a conjunction. Why do you need a conjunction? So that you can have more than one subject and one verb. In the beginning, it's stated that a sentence has a subject and a verb, at least a subject and a verb. But a sentence can actually has more than one subject, more than one verb, but under the condition that the sentence also has a conjunction. Now, how do you deal with compound and complex sentences? Well, a simple math can help. So, take a look at number 6. If there is one conjunction, there are two subjects and verbs. So, one conjunction, two subjects and verbs. If there are two conjunctions, then there are three subjects and verbs. And if there are three conjunctions, there are four subjects and verbs. So go and do this simple math when you take the test, when you deal with questions related to sentence structure. Let's take a look at the sample question, the one that you did earlier. Here, you have, a minute, you have a conjunction. Do you need a conjunction? Oh, no, not yet. Here, the subjects, there are two subjects. No, one subject, the players, but you have two verbs. Probably two verbs, because called can be a reduced form. But you have one subject, you have possibly verbs. Because you have possibly two verbs, there is possibility you have two subjects if there is a conjunction. Okay, you have one subject, possibly two verbs. The sentence can have two subjects if there is a conjunction. If you take a look at the options, A, there is another subject. So probably correct. But then, if you put A there, you will have two subjects, two verbs, but no conjunction, which is not okay. Remember the simple math? Two verbs, two subjects, one conjunction. Three verbs, conjunctions. Here, you have, if you choose A, then you will have two subjects, two verbs are called. It becomes a verb, no longer a participle form, two verbs, but there is no conjunction. So option A is wrong. If you choose B, then you will have one subject and two verbs. Again, the simple math, if there are two verbs, then you need one conjunction. There's no conjunction here. So the answer B is wrong. Now what about answer C, that are? That can be a conjunction. And that can also be a modifier that modifies a subject. So it can take the place of a subject. So if we put that here, we have already, the requirement fits. It has a conjunction, that, and it also has another subject, that, because that can function as a conjunction, but it also function as a subject modifier of a subject. That's why is C. The players use rackets that are often called bats or paddles. Let's take a look at the next question. Here you have already got a subject, Sim and other scientists, and also a verb, eating. And then you have no other subjects, no other verb, but there is still a possibility to have another subject and another verb, because a sentence has at least one subject and one verb. It doesn't mean that the sentence cannot have more than one subject and more than one verb. So keep the possibilities open. So there's still a possibility that you need, or there is another subject and there is another verb. Let's take a look at the options here. A, that with insects. If we choose this sentence, then you have that, a conjunction, and then with insect, you have with another subject. So it fits the requirement. But the position of the subject and the verb should be questioned. In an affirmative sentence, the subject comes before the verb, while in a question sentence, the subject comes after the verb. In this sentence, it's definitely an affirmative sentence, a positive sentence. So, subject should come before the verb. So although option A fits the requirement, it is not the right answer because the sentence itself is an affirmative sentence, a positive sentence, a statement. Now let's move on to B. B again also fits the requirement. It has a conjunction. So it can have, if there is a conjunction, you can have another subject and you can have another verb. So there will be one conjunction, two subjects and two verbs, and meet the simple math. And then take a look at the position of the subject and the verb. Here the position is not reversed, subject comes before the verb. And so because it fits the requirement, there's a conjunction, two subjects and two verbs, and the position is the position of a statement. That's why the correct answer is B. C and D, of course, are wrong because there is no conjunction. If you choose C or D, then you have repeated subjects and repeated verbs without a conjunction. Remember, you cannot have repeated or double subjects, double verbs, unless you have a conjunction. Now, what about questions related to parts of speech? The second part in the second section of PBT. Hopefully you are already familiar with this terminology, parts of speech, but I bet you're familiar with nouns, the terminologies of nouns, adjectives, adverbs, verbs. So I think they are the bigger ones out of 8. Of course, you need to know all 8 in order to take this proficiency test. But I'm going to limit to the big ones, quote unquote, noun, adjective, adverbs. And we have already dealt with verbs in the sentence structure. So first understand that each part of speech has a certain function or role. Nouns, for example, the common roles of nouns are as subjects, objects, object of preposition, and object of preposition. So subject, object, and object of preposition. While for adjectives, adjective has a role to modify nouns. And adverbs modifies adjectives, modifies verbs, and modifies adverbs, other adverbs. So knowing that each part of speech has a role will make it easier for you later to determine the position in the sentence. So we come to number 2. Understand that the function or role of a part of speech determines its position in a sentence. Like in the beginning, like in the early part, subject usually is in the beginning of the sentence. So that's the position of noun. A noun can be put in the beginning of a sentence if its role is as a subject. Now, what about an adjective? An adjective, because its role is to modify a noun, it is usually put before a noun. And of course, there's another opposition of adjective. It can be put after linking verb. So you have to be very careful. So it can either put before a noun or after a linking verb. If you're not sure what a linking verb is be, is, am, are, was, were, and also seem, look. Take a look and you can Google what linking verbs mean. And then adverbs. Adverbs modifies adjective, verbs, and adverbs, meaning that these adverbs must come before an adjective or before a verb or another adverb. And there is also another role of adverb that most don't really realize. They modify the whole sentence, and that's why adverbs can be put either at the back or at the end of a sentence or the beginning of a sentence. Okay, so please understand the role of each part of speech because it will determine the position. And then how do you know whether you need an adjective or an adverb or a noun in the questions related to part of speech? Then you have to pay attention to the surrounding words. Why is that? Because nouns in a certain role should be put in a certain position. Adjectives and adverbs, because they are modifiers, they have to be close to the words they modify. And that's why you need to pay attention to the surrounding words. They need to be close to the words they modify. So the surrounding words can help you decide the function or the role. Now let's take a look. So in this sentence, it is a pronoun, a noun. It's a pronoun, it changes a noun, so it's correct. It's a subject. It, and the position is at the beginning of a sentence. And then B, you have long. Long is an adjective. And then C, that, you have a conjunction. And then D, fast. Fast here is an adjective. If you take a look at this, then you know that there should be a mistake. Remember, for the second part, you have to choose the part or the word or the phrase that makes the sentence wrong. A, it, it's already correct. Long, an adjective. An adjective modifies a noun. Do you see a noun surrounding the word long? No, there is an article. And then of is a preposition. And then if there is a preposition of, if you go into detail, then a preposition of is usually between nouns. So there will be two nouns. For example, the leg of the tables, the teacher of the class. So of is always between nouns. So here, long is an adjective. It doesn't fit the requirement. So it should be a noun instead of an adjective. So the answer is B. So the wrong one is B. It should be a noun, length. Now what about the next question? The article goes with a noun. It's already correct. Has made is a verb. It's already in the right position. And we don't know the time here. There is no time marker. So most probably it's correct. Because it just shows an effect. That's why a present perfect can be right. And then here another article, and then you take a look. Business. Business is a noun and only one singular noun. So the use of an is correct. And then the importance business. Business is a noun. And a noun is explained by an adjective. It's modified by an adjective. So before the word business, you need an adjective and not a noun. Importance is a noun. So importance is wrong. It should be important adjective. And so that's why the answer is D. Because it should be important business. And this one, A, only a canal pilot. This is already correct. It emphasizes the need that there is a condition. And then you have B, can save guide. You know that the verb is guide, can guide. And then save there is put. And chips is an adjective. You can see, okay, ships noun and then fast adjective. Two narrow channels and see is noun, locks noun. Remember, adjectives modify nouns and adjectives can come before nouns. So locks, you have before locks narrow. So yes, after narrow, because adjectives come before noun and the other way around, nouns come after adjective, then here locks is already correct. Fast ships, adjectives comes before noun, fast is adjective, ships noun, correct. Safe guide, guide is, and then it should modify by an adverb, but here instead of an adverb, you have an adjective safe. So it should be an adverb, safely guide. Okay, we talk a bit about adjectives and adverbs and how you need to know their position, their role, because, you need to know their functions, roles to determine their position. And nouns also the same. You need to know the role, object, subject, object of preposition. And of course, don't forget the pronouns that replace the nouns, which take the same function as nouns, as subject, as object, and object of proposition. But for nouns particularly, because this is quite tricky, I believe you need to have knowledge of vocabulary. You need to have lots of practice to detect this kind of questions. Please be careful with singular and plural forms, because and as well as countable and uncountable forms. This is very difficult for us Indonesians because English is not our native language and we are not used to having singular and countable and uncountable forms. I don't think it actually exists in our sentence. So we're not used to distinguish this kind of forms. And then there are many words that are unfamiliar with us, many nouns. And sometimes we don't know whether that the particular words can be singular, can take singular and plural form, or can only take singular form, whether the nouns are countable or can have both countable and uncountable forms. So please be very careful. For some nouns, some common nouns, it's very easy, like in this sentence. Mohandas Gandhi was in charge of a Red Cross unit. Of course, units is wrong because you have article "a". Article "a" always means that's followed by a singular noun. So obviously, B is correct. For this kind of simple noun, it's easy. And this one also, I believe, singular, tall is singular, so no problem there. Thousands of men. Here's the problem. Thousands indicate a plural form of noun follows. So meaning that the wrong answer is B. The option is B. Option we choose is B. Man. It should take plural form man. Not man, but man. I'm sorry. This is probably a bit trickier than the previous two questions. Role, of course, a role, yes, it fits articles for singular, and then role also singular noun, no problem. International action, international is an adjective, and then afterward we have the word action. Uh, and then action here can be actually countable and uncountable, so no problem here. Now on the corruption, corruption is it cannot take article Uh, an uncountable noun cannot be counted, meaning it cannot take the article or an because an counts as one. So please be very careful. So that's why here the answer is corruption. Corruption, uncountable, cannot take article a. Now this one, a center, obviously it's correct. Center is a countable noun. It can take the article a, but it has to fit again the requirement. When you have an article or an, then it should be singular form. So here center is singular. Then finance, uncountable, it's correct. Finance can be countable and can also be uncountable. Be very careful, it has different meanings. And then politics is a side, even though it's uncountable, it takes the form as politics, but it doesn't mean that this word is plural. But fortunately here politics is not underlined, so it's a relief. If it is underlined, then we need to know that politics is actually singular, uncountable politics, although it has an as. So subjects often take as. And then after that, communications, again, we are fortunate here in this problem that communication is not underlined, because most probably think that communication should be uncountable. But actually, communication can take the form of countable nouns. It has a different meanings, the types. So when we talk about the types of communication, means of communication, then it can be countable communication. Music, just like politics, it's uncountable, but take the as ending. So music, music here is wrong. Music should not take the as ending. It's not a subject. Music is uncountable, so the wrong one is C, music. Music is not like politics, not like economics, which take the S ending. And then culture, some of you also answered culture. Culture can take, again, two different forms, countable and uncountable. Uncountable means like the custom or the belief or the way of life, while cultures in plural form and countable form means a country or a group. So there are types of beliefs. So please be very careful in this also. Actually, this is what I do, some tip. When I do this kind of problem, I try to be open-minded that there is this possibility, again, because English is not our native language, there is this possibility that an option that looks incorrect because to our understanding it's a countable or an uncountable noun to our understanding may have a different form, like culture, like finance, like communication. So we need to eliminate those possibilities. If culture can have both, probably this is already correct and the correct option. And then finance, because finance can take plural form. This is also probably a correct answer. So meaning The one that is not plausible is music, because music cannot take the as ending, although it seems like a subject. I myself almost get confused. Okay, music is not a subject, it is uncountable. So the wrong one is music. So I think I'm going to recap, especially for the second part. So please understand parts of speech. You need to learn about part of speech. There are 8 types of parts of speech. At least for now, for the beginning, focus on the bigger ones, quote unquote, noun, adjectives, verbs, adverbs. Because knowing this part of speech will help you determine its function and its role, and understanding the function of the role of each part of speech help you decide position. So knowing the for now, because nouns can take singular, plural form, countable and uncountable form, which can be very, very confusing for us because we do not know those forms in our language. So again, before I end the session, let's have another try. You still in Pair Deck. Let's see whether you can do the following questions or not. Yes, this is the first one. Okay, and so answer is B. Let's move on to the next question. And the right question is C. Next question. The right answer is next question. And the answer is student. Next question. Please be very careful. with parts of speech. Take a look at each underlined word. Remember its role. Then look at the position, look at the sounding words. And the answer is the flights. Flight again can take countable and uncountable form. This is again very tricky. Flight, when you talk about flight as a act of flying, then it's uncountable. But if you talk about flight as if taking a trip on a plane, then it is countable. Because it means in the previous sentence, it means the act of flying, it's uncountable. Now what about this one? Now I'm going to show you the responses for this question. And you can take a guess, okay? So I'm going to show the responses. If you haven't answered, take a guess. So you can, tag along others' answers. This is again a question that is very tricky. Okay. This is where you take the really wrong one. So not, this is possible, but this can also be right. This can also be wrong. But really take a look at the wrong one, the obviously wrong one. So the answer is nature, because it's obviously wrong. It should be natural adjective. Flowers, yes, I bet most of you say flower is uncountable. I do agree. Flower is uncountable, but flower can take a plural form, can be countable if it means types of flower. So if you say wheat flower and then corn flower, they become flowers. And then the next question. Again, I'm going to show the responses to help you decide which is the correct answer. Uh, mention means that past tense. And then here you have typical. Plain. Plain is an adjective. Typically. And an adjective is modified by an adverb, not another adjective. Typical is another adjective. So this is wrong. It should be typically. So the answer is typical. Yes. I guess that's all for my presentation. So again, a bit of recap. When we deal with the second part, we need to really understand sentence structure and parts of speech. Sentence structure, you need to know, you have to deal with subject, verbs, conjunctions, and in parts of speech, you need to deal with the 8 parts of speech, but focus on the bigger ones first, and then know their function, roles to determine their position. And be careful with nouns. Thank you. That's all. I think I'm going to stop sharing. I believe if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer your questions. Thank you, host.
Okay, thank you very much, Ibu Ade Ari. What a very great presentation. Yeah, thank you very much. Big hands, everybody. So here we have some questions. I would like to read the first question. It's from Andi Fitriah Arifin. The question is there an easy way to teach parts of speech for TOEFL preparation students? Usually it's difficult for them to differentiate noun, verbs, or adjective, especially when it's a derivation. Yes, ma'am, please.
Okay. Teaching parts of speech. Well, again, actually, that's why we have like requirements for students taking TOEFL preparation class. So my first advice, it's not about the teaching itself, but first about the requirements of the students. Have the students met the requirements of taking a preparation class? Because they need to have basic English.
Sorry, ma'am, you're waking up. Yeah,
The class. That's the first.
Excuse me, ma'am, can you repeat?
Oh, okay. First, it's not about the teaching. I'm going to emphasize on meeting the requirements, so students' requirement. Do the students meet the requirements of attending a TOEFL or an preparation class? Because it's difficult if they do not have basic English. So that's first and foremost, I believe. So do the students meet the requirements or not? So it's not suggested to have participants attending proficiency classes without basic English. And then teaching parts of speech, I think you need to have the right materials to teach. So if you have like books, commercial books, usually they don't really put chunks and they put chunks of parts of speech, or they deal with nouns first and then adjectives first, adverbs first. But they need to take, you need as teachers also to take a look at whether the level of difficulties are also there or not. If they only provide materials based on parts of speech, then it's rather difficult. So take a look also at the materials. And then 3, the strategies. For strategies, you have to tell them about the role or functions. Explain again. The roles of each part of speech, the function of each part of speech, the position where you should put each part of speech. And then the last one, but not the least, obviously, your student need to have a vast amount of vocabulary. So again and again, making them read, add vocabulary, develop their vocabulary will help a lot in a proficiency, in taking a proficiency test. Because when you deal with part of speech, you also deal with vocabulary. You need to know whether this word is an adjective or not. Sometimes you don't need to know the meaning for adjectives and adverbs. You can guess with the suffixes, the L, the ON for noun, the li for adverb. Sometimes you don't need to know the meaning. Not sometimes, yeah. Rarely do you need to know the meaning, but oftentimes you need to know the meaning, Pak Bu. So that's the key. If you ask me about how to teach part of speech, in terms of teaching grammar, knowing the position, knowing the role, and then determine the position, that's the key. But another one, make sure that your students build vocabulary, like it or not, because it really helps. I think that's all.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So there are four things that we need to know before we teach or before we learn. It's not about the teaching, but first the students must meet the requirements ya. Jadi ada batas-batas tertentu yang memang siswa harus sudah miliki sebagai dasar untuk belajar TOEFL. Karena TOEFL itu dua hal, selain bahasa Inggris juga harus melawan tesnya itu sendiri. Oke. Dan kemudian sebagai guru, you have to find good materials. Melihat dulu materinya harus yang bagus, terutama untuk part of speech. The strategy is you have to drill, repeat, and explain again and again until the students understand. Jadi mungkin pengulangan, repetition sangat penting. Roles-nya apa, function-nya apa, posisinya di dalam kalimat apa. Dan terakhir, membangun kosakata, developing or building the vocabulary. Terima kasih. Hope it answers the questions from Andi Fitria Arifin. Now let's go on to the next question from Mr. Ahmad Zaki Yamani. The question is, how tips understand about structure in sentences? Yes, ma'am.
What's the question?
The question, how tips? What are the tips to understand about structure in sentences?
Oh, okay. That's from Pak
Ahmad Zaki Yamani.
Okay, Pak Ahmad Zaki. To understand structure again, Pak, from the presentation earlier, the key is the word structure, Pak. The structure of a sentence is that a sentence should have at least one subject and one verb. So that's the key, to know the structure itself. A sentence needs to have at least one subject and one verb. Can it have more than one verb and one subject? Sure. But then you need another thing, conjunction. And the simple math should have one conjunction, two subjects, two verbs. Two conjunctions, three subjects, three verbs. If there is no conjunction, meaning only one subject and one verb. But sometimes you need this form of verb to make the sentence meaningful. Because you need another form of verb to make the sentence meaningful. That's why you need to reduce the verb. The reduced form of a verb is in the form of present participle if it has an active meaning, and past participle if it has a passive meaning. That's it.
Siap.
Thank you.
Ya, oke. So, yang utama adalah kita menganalisis apakah kalimat tersebut memiliki subjek atau verb. Kemudian seperti yang Ibu Ade Ari katakan, kita juga harus menganalisis menggunakan matematika. Kalau ada lebih dari satu subjek atau verb, kita harus melihat apakah ada conjunction gitu. Nah, conjunction, ingat kata hubung, and, or, but. Kemudian juga ada hierarkinya ketika dia tidak menjadi kata kerja utama, kita harus juga mengenal reduce verb. Reduce, dia turun kelasnya, ada dua, present participle atau past participle. Oke, I hope it answers the question. Jadi memang tidak langsung mudah, tapi untuk menganalisisnya seperti menganalisis sebuah bagian-bagian kalimat itu perlu latihan. Terutama,
right. So,
ya, ma'am.
can I say something? So,
Yes.
our session is actually, we aim to help you to see what you need to deal first. If you have like weaknesses or you have problems in taking the proficiency test. So, pay attention. TOEFL paper-based test, not proficiency test in general, but TOEFL PPT, because part 2 only in TOEFL PPT. You need to really understand sentence structure and parts of speech. That's it. Knowing these two things will help you a lot in part 2. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Ya, jadi intinya memang sangat penting ya, lihat kepalanya apa tuh, subjeknya apa, verbnya apa. Kalau sudah bisa lihat kepalanya, lihat badannya, predikatnya apa, lebih mudah memahami. Tinggal sisanya kita tambahkan. Ma'am, there is a question, ma'am. Actually, it's from me. Which one is more difficult? The first part or the second part of the structure section?
For me, I cannot say anything about others, but for me, the second part. Why? Because it's a TOEFL, any proficiency test is a time limited test. So there's a constraint in time. So when we move to the second part, it's like that we only have very limited time, and then we have to decide very quickly which one is wrong. And sometimes we can actually misread thing and then miss thing. So that's quite tricky because of the time, and then we have to do it very fast. And then again, as sample questions that I showed earlier, there is this there are probabilities in every sentence. So one option can be right, can be wrong. Another option can be right and wrong. So you need to actually decide which one is obviously wrong. And within a limited time, it's quite difficult to do that. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. Yeah, so there are questions. Yeah, there is another question, ya, Pak Jeff. Yeah. Okay, this is from Mr. Trias. From Mr. Trias from Purwokerto. The question is, grammar is one difficult material for students to master. Many of them use their feeling in structure. My question is it possible for them to learn grammar automatically or indirectly through reading? Because I think proper reading text always have good and proper grammar. So what's your answer, ma'am?
Yes, I agree with you definitely, Pak Trias from Purwokerto. Yes, please make sure that your students read a lot, because taking proficiency test is not merely about grammar. Now, actually, most proficiency tests, only TOEFL PBT, I believe, has this particular section on grammar. While in other proficiency tests, they all already integrate grammar to skills, to speaking, to reading, listening. So yes, obviously, please do this. Exposure to English will help a lot in terms of building their feeling, like you said, which is very, it is accepted. And also, of course, it will build their vocabulary as well, and which is very necessary even when they work on grammar. Because again, we have this misconception about there is no need for us to learn about grammar because we just need to speak. We don't need to learn about grammar. It's actually a misconception. If you read more about grammar, grammar is not about the thing that we learn, ya, struktur kalimat and segala macam. No, grammar is more about meaning. So understanding grammar is actually about understanding meaning. So every time when I show you a question, I always relate this to meaning. That's why it is very much related to vocabulary, because grammar is for meaning, vocabulary is for meaning. So yes, Pa, it's all about building meaning. And by having a good reading text, they build this grammar in a meaningful way. They know grammar is not just a small part, part of this English learning world, but grammar is there to help them understand meaning. So they know grammar in context. So Pa, big applause to you. If you have already done this, please do this. Thank you, Pa.
Yay, okay. So reading is also important, ya, ma'am, ya?
Yes.
Okay. Uh, for the next question, do you have any suggestion if we want to also practice the grammar through reading? Because when we read the sentences again and again. Are there any suggestions or advice which reading materials should we start with?
Okay, for reading materials, I suggest again graded reading should be your first choice for your students or children, because if you give like magazines and then commercial reading materials, they do not have any levels of reading understanding, then it's very difficult for these kinds of students. So make sure you start with graded reading materials. Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you. Tidak terasa waktu telah menunjukkan pukul 11:34. Nah, apakah masih ada pertanyaan Bapak Ibu? Silakan di chat. Silakan diketik di chatnya. Oh, ini ada dari Bapak Agus Budiawan, Ibu. Pertanyaannya adalah, my students often told me that they didn't have enough time to finish the second part of structure. What is the best strategy in terms of time management, especially for the second part? Silakan, Ibu.
Okay, so yeah, thank you, Pak Agus, for the question. I do believe this is a common problem for all of us, including me. I think what we need to remind ourselves is the time itself, because we only have 25 minutes. We need to hurry in the first part. First part, there are 15 questions, 15. So 25 minutes for 40, meaning you only have like 30, 40 seconds for each problem. If you count the time, let's say 30 seconds for the first part, then you only have like 5 minutes, 5-6 minutes for the first part. So make sure that your students always time their so make sure that they do not go over 6 minutes for the first part. Give that a try first. 6 minutes. If 6 minutes is too difficult, then go with 10 first. 10, set the alarm, 10 minutes for first part, and then 15 minutes for the second part. And then after that, reduce the time, 9, 8, 7, 6. Because again, we sometimes miss things in the second part. Yeah, so do that part. So that's the strategy in terms of time management. Set an alarm. Start with 10 minutes for the first part. Make sure that they do not go over the 10-minute limit for first part. So they still have 15 minutes for the second part, which is very tight. If possible, below 10. Very good. Below 8. That will be very good. That's difficult. Why? Because we tend to use up our time for the first part, because we know that we can deal with this better from the second part because there are too many variables. I believe there are more variables in the second part than in the first part because the first part we focus on sentence structure, though again vocabulary, meaning are there, but it's not as many variables as in the second part. So practice time management by setting an alarm. I hope that answers your question, Pak Agus.
Thank you very much, Bu Ade. So, wow. So it's not only the knowledge, but we also need our concentration, our speed, and yours. It's like an athlete, yeah, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Maybe we will open to the last part of the question and answer sessions. Are there any questions? Mungkin mau dibuka, ma'am? Pertanyaan langsung?
Ya, oke.
Oke. Ya, mungkin ada yang mau bertanya, kita buka 3 pertanyaan. Langsung saja kalau ada yang mau bertanya, silakan di unmute atau di... Oke. Apakah ada yang mau bertanya? Sepertinya cukup berat materinya hari ini ya, Bapak Ibu. Ya, memang ya, yes please. Ada yang mau bertanya? Ibu Dian, silakan.
No.
Oh no. Okay.
I just responded to structure.
Oh.
It is structure.
Yeah, so no wonder ya, everybody.
Ringan banget kan?
Mungkin sebagai appetizer untuk lunch hari ini ya. Setelah ini semangat makan siangnya lebih tinggi.
Atau jadi hilang selera.
Iya, oke. Baik Bapak Ibu, sepertinya memang pembahasannya memang tidak mudah, tidak ringan, tapi semoga hari ini membuka wawasan kita atau mengingatkan kembali kepada kita bahwa kita kembalikan apa yang kita butuhkan. Kenapa kita butuh TOEFL? Karena banyak orang membutuhkan TOEFL itu baru tersadar di saat ini gitu ya. Banyak adik-adik kita yang memang sudah mulainya jauh lebih dulu dari kita, sementara ketika kita sekarang sudah berada pada posisi tertentu, pada profesi tertentu, kemudian tiba-tiba ada satu penghadang, wah harus memiliki nilai TOEFL, baru deh kita bingung. Belajar di mana? Aduh gimana? Nah semoga ini membuka wawasan kita karena pada akhirnya panduan apapun, buku apapun, tips apapun, kita sendiri yang akan menjalankannya. Kenali kelemahan kita, kenali kekuatan kita, terus berlatih, mencari informasi yang baik, mencari materi pelajaran yang baik, kita berikan komitmen waktu, kita berikan komitmen niat kita, nawaitu, untuk sesuatu yang memang mungkin hanya satu titik, tapi dia memang menjadi salah satu prasyarat yang harus kita lalui. Mungkin akan ada penutup, Ibu Ade Ari, before we close the session.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Baik Bapak Ibu.
Thank you Bapak Ibu.
Thank you very much for attending this session. Thank you so much. And hope this webinar can be fruitful, and then we will see again for the last part of the of this webinar next week ya Ibu ya. Kita tetap lanjut ya Bu.
Not next because there is the information, but I'm really sorry that we have to postpone to the week after next week because we have to close the operation for the whole week, I believe. Yeah. We will inform you again through the committee whether we're going to have it next week or not.
Okay. Yeah. So for the next part, the committee will inform you about the time and the link, etc. Okay, stay with us, Lia Pajajaran. Before we leave the meeting, as usual, our ritual, can you please turn on your video? We are going to take a picture for all of the participants today. We want to make memories here. Ya. Sebentar, Mr. Jeffrey. Kita beri waktu dulu para peserta untuk menyalakan videonya supaya semua tampak di layar. Ibu Dian, silakan. Yang belum pakai jilbab, yang belum pasang alis, silakan dulu alisnya 3 detik. Oke.
Oke, saya mau ambil gambarnya. Silahkan berpose. Ini ada 2 screen, jadi di screen pertama dulu. Silahkan kalau mau bergaya. Ya, sebentar. Saya akan hitung. Ya, siap 1, 2, 3. Ya, sebentar. Sebentar, 1 screen lagi. Bentar ya, ini saya sepertinya ada kendala. Sebentar.
Ternyata ada yang lagi berkendaraan pun ikut webinar. Selamat Ibu Natalin Setio. Waduh, semangat sekali Ibu. Salam sehat semua, Bapak Ibu.
Ya, sekarang screen kedua. Siap. Bentar ya. 1, 2, 3. Ya, begitu?
Sudah ya?
Sudah.
Thank you very much. Oke. Terima kasih Bapak Ibu. See you next time. Stay tuned in the same channel. Goodbye.
Thank you so much for everything. Bye.
Thanks, Mbak
Bye-bye.
You are
Ade.
welcome. You are
Thanks, Pak
welcome.
Jajaran Team, Pak Edwin,
Yes.
Pak Jeffrey.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye, Miss Ru.
Bye. Your student.